Hundreds of thousands of people gathered in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021, to protest what they had strong reason to believe was a fraudulent presidential election. Our country couldn't shake the growing, stunning, credible evidence of deception that had been exploding since the early morning hours of November 3, 2020. The people we had trusted to protect the truth, to protect us, and to protect our country had ignored the evidence, changed it, lied about it, or all of the above. But on this day, January the 6th, 2021, we the people had come from all over the country to hold our government accountable. All eyes were on the election fraud. When the day was over, the focus of the nation had successfully been moved to a breach of the Capitol. In January of 2021, I traveled to Washington, D.C. to participate in the rally at our nation's capital. That was the day when our legislators were to vote on whether or not to certify the 2020 presidential election or to delay their decision for 10 days, giving state legislators in 6 key states some time to review evidence that was mounting, daily proof that strongly pointed to voter fraud. Most of this evidence was targeted at a few cities in those states, and this was important because all indications were that there was more than enough firepower in the proof to overturn our presidential election. I did vote for Donald Trump, but I did not fly halfway across the country to participate in this rally because of Donald Trump. I came because I felt strongly that our political authorities were ignoring the truth, lying about the truth, or both. I was protesting the acceptance without review of mounds of evidence that was growing exponentially, which proved that the election in 6 states in particular was compromised. I was protesting the legislators, the media, and judges, including our Supreme Court, governors and attorney generals who were ignoring overwhelming evidence that put the results of the election in question. I was protesting the Dominion machines and the scorecard and hammer software that these particular states were using. I was protesting those who were looking away from hard evidence. Evidence like hundreds of thousands of fraudulent mail-in ballots. Over 5,000 witnesses who signed affidavits saying that they had seen hundreds of thousands of ballots being marked by poll workers solely for Biden. Or witnesses who had watched poll workers in these cities run thousands of ballots only marked for Biden through machines 4 and 5 times over. Or witnesses who watched as boxes of ballots marked solely for Biden were brought into back rooms of voting areas. I was protesting authorities who were ignoring video taken from security cameras in Atlanta. These videos clearly showed boxes of ballots marked for Biden, hidden beneath cloth-draped tables that were then run through voting machines after they were taken out from under these tables, and they were run through multiple times after all the other poll workers had left. I was protesting attorney generals, district judges, and appellate judges in key states who had changed election laws by illegally and unconstitutionally overriding laws passed by their state legislators, and who had stopped credible evidence cold by not allowing state legislators to review the evidence. I was protesting a few dishonest people in a few big cities who were starting to make my life miserable, and the life of our country miserable, and soon the life of the world miserable, because they were paid over $500 million in blood money from Mark Zuckerberg, paid to throw the presidential election away by acting in various and nefarious ways and methods that were the opposite of the principles and the values of America.
We were a group of 5 women from all over the country. Let me say right up front that I am not ashamed we went. We were unaware of any of the supposed violence and the narrative that was being reported about the rally in real time. There was no cell service, no bathrooms, no water or food. We rallied to uphold our Constitution and to support our congressmen and senators who were supposed to be standing up to ensure fair and honest elections. We never breached any barriers or went beyond any, and we never saw anyone else do so either. We left the Capitol grounds after we heard that the building had been breached by Antifa and that there would be no vote that afternoon. There were 2 groups of people at the Capitol on January the 6th. Anarchists and good law-abiding concerned citizens. The narrative was changed that day. The Capitol was breached by some kind of anti-freedom operatives that were up to no good. We stood with 700,000 concerned, positive, peaceful, patriotic citizens to defend the 10-day investigation of the election integrity. Not one time did we ask to overturn the election results. We needed to give the states a chance to certify and correct their electors. It has been widely reported that this certification of the electors is ceremonial. There is nothing in the Constitution that is ceremonial.
In this video, Dallas and I will share with you our experience in Washington, D.C. that day, and afterwards we'll examine what we think had to have happened. Finally, we'll leave you with a few cogent questions that no one in our government or our media seems to be asking, and thoughts that no one in our government, and surely not our media, seems to be thinking. But we bet you are. Those who are trying to take over our country think that you and I are stupid. They think that our memory only goes back as far as the last breaking news alert. They don't think that we remember Benghazi, where members of our American embassy were allowed to die when help was just a little over a mile away and they were told to stand down, and a certain presidential election was only 12 days away, and who told them to stand down. They don't think that we're smart enough to remember Hillary's emails, or Hillary's uranium deal with Russia, or Hillary's paid-for and fake Russian dossier, or the complete Russian hoax, or Michael Flynn, or the first presidential impeachment, or Hunter Biden's laptop, or Joe Biden's quid pro quo, or the $4.5 million that Joe was paid by China, or the second impeachment. Gee, the list goes on and on. No, they don't think that we're smart enough to remember all that. But most of all, they're afraid you will remember and you will not forget, and you will keep pressing in on election officials and the election fraud on November 3rd and November 4th of this last year. That is what they do not want any of us to remember.
This is my vote. This is my voice. We are Americans. We stand against evil and we defend our Constitution against enemies, both foreign and domestic. We demand honesty and integrity in the 2020 election and all elections to come. When others are silent, we must step up, stand up, and speak up. Americans cannot be silenced.
We were up at 4:30 and off toward the Capitol by 6 o'clock that morning.
One of the girls that we had with us, her mother was concerned about her going, and she has a couple of small children, and she suggested that she get a bodyguard.
After we met Tank, we walked several hours in a line that finally spilled us out to Ellipse Park and the grounds south of there that surrounded the Washington Monument.
And everybody was so kind that we were in line with. When we did get up to the Washington Monument, we saw that guy with the buffalo horns and the get-up that he had with the Confederate flag and all. He was standing on that wall.
He was standing on that wall, very conspicuous, I thought. Like, look at me, look at me. Our group stood north of the Washington Monument, facing north towards the White House, and several enormous screens that were constructed so that we could see a variety of speakers more closely. We stood in virtually the same spot in the cold, rain, and wind for over 3 hours. Did you ever hear anything that was insightful?
I just felt like that all of the speakers were excited. They were excited for our country. The people that was there was excited to hear them. The crowd was very uplifted. Nobody seemed mad.
Yeah, they did not seem mad. They seemed hopeful.
Yes.
They seemed like, and I felt this way, like we the people are here and it's going to be okay.
But I think the people that was there really wanted to be there. We wanted to make certain, this is why I went, to make certain that my representatives, my congressmen and my senators voted for election integrity and to investigate, to pause for 10 days, investigate the election. That's what this whole thing was about. Finally, President Trump began to speak, but after 45 minutes, we had to leave to try to find a restroom. Imagine 500 to 700,000 people gathered in one place, and there are no bathrooms available anywhere except 3 stalls each in the men and women's bathrooms beneath the Washington Monument. There was no water, nor any food available anywhere. We left the rally and walked east down a gravel promenade that's about 1.2 miles long. Towards the end of the lane, we spotted 5 to 7 new buses parked in some really good parking spots and to our right. So we went over to them to ask their drivers if we could pay to use the restrooms on the buses. I remember thinking at that time, those buses are parked in position A. I mean, it was a perfect way to get in and out. It was like a VIP parking deal. And come to find out, an acquaintance of ours in southwestern Oklahoma, he too went to the rally. He left earlier than we did, and to again find a bathroom. And when he walked by those buses, he saw people getting out of each one of those buses, and there was an individual at the door as those people walked out, and he was paying. Each bus had someone there, and they were paying the people that got out of the bus. We are rejected by the bus drivers, and Dallas spots something alarming. Out of the corner of my eye, I spot this gallows with a hangman's noose. And it's not a small structure. There's a man standing up there, and he's holding the noose. And he's just kind of standing there facing us and holding the noose. And I'm seeing this, and I'm thinking, what on earth is that? And why is it there? And how did it get there? And who brought in all the lumber, the tools to build it? And, you know, they say that President Trump incited the crowd. I'm sorry, but that gallows had to be built. I mean, hours.
Or brought in built. And how did it do
And
that?
how did they get it there? Because that area was closed off to traffic.
After we had failed in our attempt to use the restroom on one of these buses, we took a small sidewalk down here underneath these trees until we got to this street, and we made our way over to this crossing right here. But while we were at that crossing, we saw at least 20 vehicles, white emergency vehicles, moving from the north to the south down this street. Now this is 3rd Street. It runs between Pennsylvania and Maryland Avenues. And they were screaming. They were going high speed away from the Capitol down 3rd Street. We let them pass, and then we crossed over here, right here, and we had to use the restroom, so we went to the Botanical Gardens. There's a line of trees. So we went amongst those trees, and while one of us would potty, the others would stand with their back to us and shield us. And lest you think that's crude and rude, I'm telling you, I looked down the lane there, and there were a lot of people doing the same thing because we were desperate, weren't we, Dallas?
There was some desperate ladies there.
Well, and Tank.
Yeah.
Tank Tinkle.
Exactly. We walked up to the Capitol, and it took us another, 10 minutes maybe, just to walk over there. And the people are starting to gather. And there was this guy that I noticed right away. He didn't have a megaphone. He had on a straw cowboy hat. He was hollering at people to come on up on the steps. Everybody move forward. Everybody come on.
Yeah. So we had walked up to the steps at this time, and there was below us it was a barricade, but it was down on the ground, and it was trampled on the ground.
Mangled.
Yeah. And we were at the front of the line. So it's like, well, how'd that happen? Who did that? And we did not step across that barrier.
So there was this man laying on the ground over by the wall, and he was crying. And Tank went over to him and asked him if he had been pepper sprayed. And the guy said yes. And he said, well, keep your eyes closed. You'll be all right. Yeah. And at that point, I knew that I had a bottle of water in my pack. But I didn't dare give it up because I thought, well, what are we in for? What's going on?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we heard a lot of flash bangs. It's what Tank called them, and it was just like boom, boom, and they were tear gas being thrown into the crowd, and we didn't understand why that was going on, and so I think you asked Tank, what are they doing? Why are they tear gassing people?
Off to this direction, there was that boom, boom. It was a muffled pop, and not crisp, and then you saw this white stuff come down. And I asked Tank, I said, what is that? He said, tear gas. And I said, what is that for? Because we were just up there talking. Mm-hmm. And so, but remember that wind was pushing it back into the Capitol, and it really didn't bother me very much. And then we stayed up there and talked, and then there was another pop, pop, that muffled pop, and more of that white tear gas stuff coming down. And then it started bothering one of the other women with us, but still we didn't move. Mm-hmm. When we moved was maybe, and all this took place in about 7 minutes, I'd say within 7 minutes time. And then there were 2 bangs that were crisp. And I turned to Tank and I said, those were gunshots, weren't they? He said, yes, they were. And I said, what was that for? And it was then that I started backing down off the steps.
And at that point, you turned around, before maybe that point, you turned around and you were just in awe of the crowd.
Yeah, the crowd was starting to come up from the Trump speech, and it was unbelievable. And because I could not tell up until that moment how many people were there. I kept looking around, and all I could see was the people right behind me. I couldn't see the number of people. It was absolutely incredible. And I just sat there and I just thought, here come we the people. I mean, I was just emotional about it. I mean, like, I'm an American, and only in America can you do this. And then we got down off the steps and we got onto the grass.
We crossed over that wall and was able to get over on the grass, and we were kind of standing on a slope. And it was really bothering me, so I asked to go up on some flat ground. And so we kind of went up underneath the chamber windows is what Tank said that they were. That's where the snipers were standing later.
And I asked Tank, I said, what are they? And he said, those are snipers. And I said, why? And then there was a little construction building up there.
Yes.
Building?
Yes.
And we go up to the construction building, and as we do that, I see 2 ambulances come in with their lights on, but not their sirens. And then I saw, I would say, at least 30. You think that's about right?
I think 30.
About 30 police people come in on bicycles, and they're not hauling it.
And helmets, bike helmets.
And I asked Tank, I said, what are they here for? And I want to impress that we were asking these questions because there was no reason. There was no evidence of why this tear gas, this gunshot, these snipers, this ambulance, these police.
These people saying, come on up, everybody move on up.
There was no indication of why any of that should have been happening. But when I asked Tank, I said, what are they here for? He said, those are the mayor's goons. That's what he said to me.
That's right. I heard him say that. And then I noticed that those guys on bicycles and girls, they went underneath some shrubbery, kind of in underneath the Capitol. And because I kind of watched them where they went. And from that point on, that's whenever all of the tear gas, the pink something.
And it's bad. I remember him saying that's bad.
He said, we don't want that in our eyes.
Tank asked us to come back down the grassy hill and to get behind some heavy equipment that was on the flats beneath some trees at the base of the Capitol steps, because he was afraid people would begin to run from the gas. I was on the other side of a medium-sized forklift, not a small one, and I looked in there and the keys were in there. And I commented to the girls, I said, the keys are in here. And then about that time, this truck guy came up and he goes, the keys are in there. And I said, yeah, I think somebody wants us to take this. And he took those keys out and he put them under a yellow ratchet strap.
That's when the people came down and said, somebody has breached the Capitol. They said they breached the Capitol.
Yeah, and I asked, who breached the Capitol? And she said, I think it's Antifa.
And they'd taken the video of somebody breaching the Capitol, going in, breaking down windows or doors. I don't know. I couldn't see it. So what did you see?
Well, okay, now, we were in a circle, and I was looking over. But what I saw, I mean, this was simple. I saw some glass being broken. I saw, what I saw was a hand going in the glass and opening a door. And I remember thinking, that's it? That's all it takes to get in the Capitol?
One was stretched out and he had his head leaning up against the trunk of the tree and he was in a bad way. And he looked really sick. And the other guy was sitting on the ground and there was a fella in fatigues, like combat gear. He had on a flak jacket, it was kind of tan, and a helmet. And in his flak jacket, there was a American flag that's on a wooden stick stuck in the little pieces in the back of the jacket. And he had taken out a carton of milk, like a bottle of milk, out of his pack, and a white fluffy towel like you'd see at a hotel.
Brand new.
Brand new. And he poured some on the towel, and then he had the guy to lean his head over, and he poured the milk in his eyes, and then gave him that towel to put in on his eyes. And I thought, oh, well, the National Guard must be here. Because that guy's, dressed as a military person. And so,
what to do.
And I had kind of heard that they were supposed to have National Guard there.
Yeah.
So, but we still didn't understand why people were being tear gassed. It just didn't make any sense.
Well, it didn't make any sense because there was nothing to require tear gas or O-bombs or flashbangs or whatever the heck. Nothing to require these 30 police people, and certainly nothing to require snipers.
And we were standing there the whole time praying and saying, Lord, please help our senators to vote the right way and to stand up for our country and instigate election integrity.
They did not do that. There was another woman that came down and she was screaming, Pence has betrayed us.
And she had a megaphone.
And it was a new megaphone.
Yes.
And I said, Mike Pence?
I thought, my gosh, did he not stand up for the president and our country?
I know. I mean, the whole thing was like a 1-2 punch over and over. It was just like a whole new world was opening up to us. Shortly after this, which was now a little before 3 p.m. Eastern Time, I got a text from the mayor of Washington announcing a 6 p.m. curfew for D.C. This was the first successful phone communication of any kind that I had had all day. And immediately after this text, I received the first of 2 phone calls from my husband, who was back at home in Oklahoma and watching the TV.
He said, babe, you better get out of there. They're storming the Capitol. And I said, no, they're not. We're standing right here and nothing's going on. And he said, well, they've got it on TV. And I said, well, I don't know where they've got it because nothing's going on here. And I thought, I'm not moving. I don't care. I am not moving until that vote happens.
About 5 minutes later, my husband called back and said that the senators had been moved out of the Capitol and that the vote had been postponed until later in the evening. One of the women with us said, well, then there's no reason for us to be here. And that's when we started to leave, but not before I spotted another piece of equipment parked further down the lawn, still in front of the Capitol steps. I ran down to see if the keys were in it. They were in the machine's ignition.
I was going to tell about the guy that I saw twirling the sledgehammer. And it was like a bright lime green handled sledgehammer. And he was just kind of twirling it, and he just kind of laid it over on this big pallet of tiles that they were laying down for the inauguration that was behind the forklift. And he just put it on top of that pile of stuff, and I thought, well, what is he doing with the sledgehammer?
As we left the Capitol, we walked around to the south side of the building. And on to the east side. Never did any of us ever hear any sirens, screams, or commotion. Eventually, lots of people came to the ground surrounding the Capitol, but we never saw anyone mobbing, rushing, pushing, shoving, nothing.
Nobody was acting excited or anything that was going on. They were just there.
And we see some people up on those steps, but they're not excited.
Well, we even saw a lady pushing a baby carriage.
Yeah.
And we saw a family having a picnic
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of out on the grass on the other side of the fountain. And so we decided to take some pictures.
We left from the east side of the Capitol and headed to the subway to return to my friend's house. It was there, when we switched from network to network, that we heard and saw from all the networks, including Fox, virtually the same narrative. A narrative that we did not recognize because it was a tragedy that we had seen no evidence of. Question: how would a breaching of the Capitol have benefited Trump or his supporters at any time, but particularly before Congress had even voted on the electors? Question: who would benefit from the narrative that Trump supporters breached the Capitol? Question: why didn't we see or hear anything alarming or disturbing during our time on the Capitol grounds, which was also the same time period that news reports of the storming, rioting, and revolting at the Capitol were appearing on the national news networks? Question: who paid for the new buses, the new megaphones, the new combat apparel, the new backpacks, the new towels, the cartons of milk? Question: who organized the delivery of this equipment, the buses, and the transit of the people using these materials? Question: why were over 20 emergency vehicles with their sirens screaming racing from the Capitol long before President Trump was finished with his speech and long before we saw other people coming up to the Capitol from the Ellipse Park? Question: why haven't the people with all this new equipment been asked where they got it and who paid for it? Question: the FBI and the CIA have both reported that they knew there would be problems at the Capitol on January 6th and that they informed Nancy Pelosi of their knowledge. Why hasn't Nancy Pelosi been asked why she failed to act on this knowledge? There are many elements of our experience at the Capitol that are disconnected from what has been reported and from the narrative whose consequences became a reality when Joe Biden was inaugurated president. But remember, China Joe got where he is by cheating. Here is a map of the county-by-county vote of the 2020 presidential election. The media and those in charge of the media would have you think that we're a divided country. But we're not divided at all. And remember that within these few pockets of blue are the 6 cities that we know flagrantly cheated. We went to Washington on January the 6th because our spirit compelled us to go. No person asked us to come. What we experienced was an enormous gathering of like-minded people, not all of which liked Donald Trump, but all of whom loved their country and the hard work, the morals, standards, and values that built our country.
Honest, hardworking people that wanted to make those that cheated accountable.
It was after the event that we were able to see how thousands of good people with good hearts were used and abused, just like we always are, by greedy politicians, the media, big tech, and China, so that they can administer their coup, get their money, grab their power, and lord their contempt over the rest of us.
Think about this. They would not have one thing if they had played square.
We went to Washington because there was election fraud, and we watched as the focus of the nation was skillfully moved to a breach of the Capitol. We watch and continue to watch as this lie is promulgated by the evil politicians of both parties. Through the media, funded by China, using the powers of big tech, facilitated through a mindless ego who sits in the White House because they all cheated. This man is making quick, dramatic decisions that are, for the most part, adversely affecting my life, your life, our country, and our world.
Those of us that went to the Capitol know that there are lots of discrepancies and that this is built on a lie.
But truth will take its vengeance and make amends as long as we remember. Remember Benghazi. Remember Hillary's emails. Remember Hillary's uranium deal. Remember Hillary's bought and paid for fake Russian dossier. Remember the complete Russia hoax. Remember the Michael Flynn tragedy. Remember the first presidential impeachment. Remember Hunter Biden's laptop. Remember Joe Biden's quid pro quo. Remember the $4.5 million that we know China paid Joe Biden. Remember the second impeachment. And most of all, remember the election fraud. The spirit of America is beginning to speak, and the spirit of America will soon have her day, for she is the spirit of truth and of our country. She's the voice of our founding fathers and the heart of our God. Do what you can where you are. Thank you for watching. God bless you, and God bless America.
Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity of our elections, but whether or not they stand strong for our country. Our country.